Hi and welcome to the next video. This is video 25 and this time we are dealing with displaying all our block entries in our front end with a material card and a pagination. So we loop all over our items that we get from the back end, display them in our material cards, and we can paginate through this. Then we have our video structure as always. First we have a look at our video outcome, then we look at the user story for this outcome, and then we will implement this and close the user story later. Let's have a short look at our video outcome. So you see now we have a working home button here, or home link here, where we always navigate to our home page. And in our home page we display all our block entries. So you see we have here all our block entries with the title, the description, and who wrote it. So the author, so the user, and we have the image. And you can see if there is an image for the block entry provided, then this is here, and if not, we are using a placeholder image. We can also navigate through this, so we can go to the next page, or to the previous page, or to the last page, or we could say we want to display just 5 block entries and then navigate to all 3 pages, for example. Here, so this should be all. And we're doing this with the Angular card, or Angular material card, and the Angular placeholder. And we are just changing then the data source to display new data here. Let's have a short look at our story. Here we are in video 25 and we want to display all block entries with material card and pagination, and we want to do some small refactorings. So the story is, as a user I want to be able to paginate through all block entries, and the acceptance criteria are we want to have a new service for the block entries. We want to have a new component to display all our block entries. Our block entries should be loaded async and be displayed with Angular material cards, use of our async pipe in the HTML, so in the view. And if there is no header image, no link to header image, then there should be a placeholder instead, so a placeholder image or something like this. The block entries should be pageable, of course. We want to have an interface for block entry and a block entry pageable interface. Then we want to have a new route home and redirect to it if we don't hit this route, or if we hit no route at all. And we want to refactor our home link in navbar to navigate to home, because at the moment this is there is nothing, third line, and this is not working. So you can navigate here back. So we want to fix this. So let's go into our code, and here we can see we are in our repository and on branch develop, and everything is empty. So we can now say git flow feature start, and now we go to video 25 because our story is now video 25, and we can move this, of course, in doing. Now you see we switched to a new branch based on develop, and we're now on feature video 25. So at first what we can do is we can navigate into our API folder and run our API. And the second thing is we can go into our front end folder and can start Angular so we can see something, and then we can make another PowerShell where we go into our front end and do some stuff. So one of the first things that we can do is we can generate a new home component that we want to display. So we can just say, or use our CLI and say ng generate component, and then we go into our components folder and we want to generate a home component, so we name it home. And then you can see that here we have a new component home which is empty, and then we can fix or add something to our routing module. So right now we are having all these paths here: admin, login, register, users, update profile, and we want to have a new route which is path and home, and the component is of course our home component. And then we want to redirect to home if we don't hit any path. So we can say if we don't have any path, then we redirect to our path / home, and we want to path match full. So right now, if we have started our front end here, and we go into our front end here and we load it, and we go to an empty route, then we go to home, you see it here, and we are in our home works, so we are in our home component. Then we want to have another component, so we go again to our PowerShell here and execute some commands. So we are now doing our blog entry stuff, so we want to display all our blog entries. So we first will need a service where we can catch or get all our blog entries. And as you see here, we have a folder services where we have our authentication service, our user service, and so we want to have another service. So we say ng generate service. We can just say services, so we go into our services folder, and then we want to have our blog service. And then we see we have here our blog service, and so we stay in line with res. We can say blog minus service and just move this into this folder. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to have one component where we display all our blog entries. So we can say ng generate component, and we can say all blog entries. And we also want to do this here in our components folder. So I just, with string C, you can stop this, and then you can enter a new one. And so we see now we have our new component, all blog entries. So right now we are good to go. So one of the first things that we can do is we are here in our app component, and we don't want this to be called third line anymore, because you remember here third line, this is something I forgot. So we want to call this home, and we want very simple add a router link from Angular, and this should be home. And a second, if we hover this, we want, or if we go with the mouse over it, so if we hover over it, we want that our cursor is going to grab to a hand. So you can see it, so we can just say this is our home link class. And then we go into our CSS. And we go for home link. We say if we hover over it, then we want to have our cursor should be a pointer. So if we go now into our front end here, you see it's now home. We hover over it, we have our pointer here. If I go to users, for example, I click on this here, I navigate back. So this should be all fine now. So first step from our story is done, the first steps. So the next thing that we want to do is you can add to our home component here our all blog entries. So you see we have our selector is app all blog entries. So we can just in our home component add this here, and then this will render our all blog entries component into our home component. You see now we are here in our home component, and we are rendering our all blog entries works. So we are here in our component. So one thing that we can do now is we have a folder for admin, components, guards, interceptor services. So we can make another folder for our model or our models. So for our interface and everything, because right now they are just everywhere in the code. So this is not fine. So first we want to have our blog entry.interface.ts, and there we can export our interface blog entry. And to make it a little bit easier for us, we already have this set up in our backend. So we can just go into our blog folder here, blog entry entity interface, and we can just copy and paste this. And then we have the same. So you see we have ID, a title, a slug, a description, string, body, created at, updated at. And the only thing we need to change is we have here our author is from type user, and here we have to import our user, and you see now we import our user from our services, from our authentication service. And here is our interface user, which is not good. So we can now say we want to move this interface to our model folder. So we say user.interface.ts, and then we move this here, copy it in, and then we have to update every import. So we have to go through our files, and now we also need to do this in our authentication service. So we get our user, and probably we have to do this also in our user service. So we have to import this here. Then we can look where else do we have it. So this should be our, so let's see, services, authentication service. This should be fine now. Then we can go, we have it already also in our services 6. What is wrong here? So user component, users component. So this is also wrong, this import. So we have to import it again. Where are we using the user? So let's see, do we have any more compiling errors? So our user profile component, fix this here, we import it from our interface, we restart it, and now we see we also have it in our, let's rebuild this, and let's see if there's anything else that's wrong. But I think we should now have it here. Register, have the user here, no. And log in, I don't think so either, so this should be fine. And then we can go on if this works. So authentication service 6, app services, authentication service. Let's see. So this looks good. Let's see if everything works. If we navigate through this, go to our console, so there's no error, so this should be fine. So the next thing that we want to do is, we have here our model for block entry, and now we need something to display all our pagination. So if you remember, we have here our block entry. We have get all block entries paginated. So if we had this endpoint here, you see we get our items back, and then we have like metadata and links. So we need to enhance our model here. So what we can say is we want to export an interface meta, and we also want to have export interface links, and then we can also export an interface for everything together. So block entries, let's call it pageable, and then this exists of items, and that are block entry, and this is an array because there can be multiple. Then we have our metadata, so this is from type meta, and we have our links from type links. And now we can add this here, and I think if I remember correctly, we have somewhere here where we have all our users. We have our user data here, and we can just copy and paste this metadata to here. So this is meta, and then we have our links. And so we can just move this here to here, and then we should be fine. So if we reformat it, and we have our normal format here, and we have our user from our user interface, and we can just start developing now. So at first we can go into our user service, in our blog service of course, and here we need our HTTP client from Angular. So we can say HTTP is from HTTP client from Angular. And then at first we need just one function, so we can call this IndexAll, because we want to index all our blog entries that are paginated. So the inputs are page number, and we have a size, how many we want to display. And as a return type, we choose an observable, and this is from our BlogEntriesPageable that we just made. And then we can, we need some parameters, so we say params, and these are new HTTP params from Angular. And then we can append them some stuff, so we can say just params.append, and we can say we want to append page, and we append this as a string, and we also append on the same way our size, how many items we want to get from our API. So now we can just say return this, our HTTP client. We want to make a GET request, and this is from the type BlogEntriesPageable. And then we add our route that we want to go against. So this is API, and we can just look it up here, blog entries. So we copy this, move it in here, and then we add our parameters. So we go for params. If we want, we can pipe it, but actually I don't think that this is needed. We could pipe it, we could map then the outcome and catch an error, but yeah, it's just, we can do this later, but it's not needed here for this tutorial, I think. So now we have our blog service that should return our blog entries as pageable. And so now we can go into our home component. We display here our all blog entries component, or render it into it. And so now here we want to get all our data. So we can make it very easy. So we do have a data source, because we later want to paginate through this, so we need a data source. And this should be an observable, and this should be, of course, from our BlogEntriesPageable. And to make it very easy, so we can just call this.blogservice. So we need our blog service here, and this is from the type BlogService, and then we just call this. And we are only having our IndexAll. It's not working. Let's see. App services, authentication service. So we have here our IndexAll. Let's have a look at this here later. Normally this should be fine. It's imported like this. So we go for model and we go for user interface. Now we are in our user authentication service, and then we go for our model folder, our user interface. So, and then we have an error in source update user profile. Okay, this is the error. Update user profile component. and here we are not having the user, but of course we have it in our interface. And now we can go again to our BlogEntries component, and here we need some parameter, or we have to get some inputs. And so you remember the first is the page and the second is the size. And as you remember here in nest.js or with typeorm, the first page is always page 1 and not page 0, so we always want to get the first page, and then we want to get the 10 entries. So we can just finish this because we subscribe later to it in our HTML, so in our view with the async pipe from Angular, so we don't need to do any more here. Then we have to think, what do we want to do? So we have another on paginate change, so if we make a changing request to paginate, we need to do this here because we have some custom logic. So we say page event from Angular, and we have also our page event here. This is from type page event, and then we can here first switch to our HTML, to our view, and make it a little bit fancier. So first we just can go with a div, and we could, for example, say we add some styles. So normally classes would be better here, but just for presentation purposes we make it like this. So we have a width like this, and we say margin left 25%, so it should be centered. And then we want to have our met card, and as you remember before, we have already imported all the modules like the met card module, pagination module into our app.module, so we can just use it like this. And then in our met card we want to display every entry or every item in our met card. So what we do is we use env4, so we loop over an array of data here. So we can just say let block entry off, and then we do need here our data. So we go for our data source that we called here data source, and because this is an observable, we need to get it async, so this will automatically subscribe to this data. And we can add this, and if this is undefined, then we don't go for it, but if it's defined, we go for items. And we can also say we want to add some style here, so let's say margin top, so that every entry is a little bit, or every card has a little margin to the next card. Then inside our card we can go for a div, and this div should be, or let's first go and display our data, so to check if everything works. So we could go here for card.title. So let's go to our home component and let's say card is undefined. Okay. Yeah, of course we need a star here. So now everything is good compiled, and you see we have some entries here. Okay, let's think about it. Yeah, so it's not card, but it's BlogEntry.title. And now you see we have our titles from our blog entries here. And if we also want to display something, so we could go into our Blogservice, and we could, for example, pipe this and tap here and just say console log and log everything out, so we have it on our console and we can have a look into the data. So you see here, we are now in our data, we log it out, and you see we have our items that are all our blog entries that are having also our author as an object. And then we have our metadata, our links, so we can use this for pagination. So you see this already looks okay. So now we have to do, or to add some extra logic. So we are in our HTML, So what we could, for example, do is we want to, or we could make this for display flex, so that we can display this as a row, so that we can, for example, like you remember, every blog entry does have the option to add like an image, a header image to it. So we could display this here. So we could add here another div, and in this div we could add our image. And so we could say our source is here. We go for our image source. So just let me copy this here, so we are a bit faster. So we go against our API, and then, as you remember, we have our blog entries, and then we can go for image. And this is just the link that we are having here. So blog entries, image, and then this is the name of the image that we want to download. So we have image here, then we have a slash, and then we can just add the link that we want. So we have here our blog entry dot, and then we can just look this up in our model or in our interface. So this is the header image. So we go for blog entry dot header image, and let's have a short look if this is working. You see now, because I added just one blog entry with an image, we are having this here, and the others are all broken. So we don't want this because this does not look nice. So the first thing, or one thing that we want to do, is we add some CSS for this image, that they are always the same size. And the next thing is you want to have like a placeholder image that is displayed if this here is undefined or null. So what we can do is first we can go for the same CSS that we have here in our user profile for our user profile, or was it in our users? No. Update user profile probably. Yeah, here we have our image CSS tag, and so we can just copy this, and then we see that our images are all the same size. And then we can again, we want to add a placeholder. So for example, in Angular you're having here in our source folder you have an asset folder, so we can make here a new folder and call it placeholders. And then I prepared an image here, so this is my placeholder image, and we can rename this to placeholder blog entry. And then our HTML, we can go here for ngIf, and then we want just to check if our blog entry dot header image is null, because you remember when we get here all our blog entries, we have here our header image, and this could be null if there is nothing, if there's no link. So if this is not null, then display the image, and then we can add here something else, and then we just say we want to display a placeholder image, and for this to work we have to add here now an ng template. So we say ng template, and this is just rendered in runtime and at the beginning, and so we give this the ID custom this should be placeholder image, and this here is our placeholder image. And then we can just go for image, and here we add to the source our placeholder. So we go for path up, path up, path up. We go into asset folder, placeholders, and choose our placeholders block entry. And we can reformat it a bit. So, and then we have, or we can have a look at it, and then you see we are all where our image is null. We have our placeholder, and then we could make it a little bit nicer. So we have here our block entry title. We can add here or this into the next div. And to this div we can just give a little margin to the left. So we can just say, let's say margin left 30 pixels. and where we could add like h2, and this is our title. And then we could also add like a P, also a normal paragraph, and could go for blog entry dot description, because you remember every blog entry is not just having a title, it's having a description, a body, whatever. So we could go here for description, and whatever we want. Also we could go for a small and say author is our blog entry dot author dot name, and let's just check this. And now I think this should be fine. So we are having all our blocks here. We have them displayed in a okay way. So we don't want to waste them enough time or too much time here. And so now we want to just add our pagination. So let's reformat this. And now we want to add our paginator. So what we do is we go for met paginator. And here we can just look at what we did before in our users component, where we display all the users. And there we have our met paginator, because we need to do some custom stuff. And this is, we will explain it now. We have here our met paginator. And this is having the length of the met paginator is our data source .meter.total items, because we have to customize it, because we are using the thing from nest.js-paginate in our backend, so we return data a bit different than Angular material is used to, so we can customize it. So we want to have our length is our meter total items, page size our data source.meter.items per page. Our page size options can be whatever you want, but I say 5, 10, 25 and 100. And if we paginate, then we want to have our paginate event and call the method or our function on paginate change. And we want to display the last and first buttons to paginate to the first or the last page. So we can go, or we now have to do the on paginate change function. And there we have to property meter does not exist. Yeah, of course we have to load this async, because it could be that we are loading our data as an observable we are returning, so we have to do this here too. So we say it's async, and then if it's there, then we add this, so we can copy and paste this and go here with our data source and go for meter, and we can also and then it's there. So this should work now. So we see we compiled successfully, and then we have our on paginate change function, and there we catch our page event. And so the first thing is our page that we want to paginate to is our event.page index, and then we have our size. How many items we want is our event.page size. So you see we have length, page size, previous page index. So we go for size. And so normally in Angular material it is like this, that the page index would start at 0. So as you remember in our backend with nest.js, our page index with Postgres is always starting at 1. So if we would pass in here 0, like Angular material is returning here, then we would always get displayed a 0 page from nest.js, so from our backend, and there would be no entries, so the entries would be on the first page. So we always have to say our page is page +1 to add this, and then we can just make a new subscription and say this data source is our Blogservice.IndexAll, and then we add our page and our size as inputs and subscribe to this, and then we can check if everything is working fine. So we see we have now our page options here. We can paginate, then we go to the second page. We can say we want to display 5 items per page. We can go to the previous page, first page, display 5 items. Why it's not displaying 5? Let's see. So now, let's say 5. We display 10. Why? Blogservice IndexAll page and size. We have here our page. Page and size. Here, so just let's see what we are doing. Simple thing that I did wrong here. It's not size. So if we go into our backend and look it up here, you see in our block controller we are going for limit and not for size. So we have to switch this here in our block service for limit. And then we just change this here for limit and here for limit, and then this should work. So it's always a little bit tricky if we go here for size or page size. So this is actually the limit, and so we add this here, and then we should see that we make here a write request with limit to 10. If we go for limit to 5, then we're just having displayed 5 entries. We can navigate through them to the next 5 and to the last page here. So this should be all fine. So let's see what we can make better in our code here. This looks quite nice. We can remove this here. And now we can just check against our story and then close it. So we can see here, let's check. We have a new service for blog entries. We have done this. We have a new component for displaying all our blog entries. We have, we load our blog entries async. We display them with the card. We use async pipe, and we have, if no header image is there, then we display a placeholder. Our blog entries are pageable. We have an interface for the blog entries and for the pageable. We have a new route for home. And we have a new link for our home link, so we can move this to done. Now we see that this looks all like working. So the next thing, then we can make a navigate to the detail page, or make a next page where we can add a blog entry. So at the moment I'm doing this here with a post request in Postman to add a new blog entry. Upload image, create blog entry here. But this is something that we also should do here in our front end. So right now I can commit to all changes. So we can say git add -a. And then we can say video 25. Edit new all blog entries component. Display all blog entries and make it pageable. And we can say git push and push this to our origin branch. And I will merge this later into our develop branch and into our master branch, because right now I'm like 4 weeks in front because I'm soon going to holidays, so I have to produce some videos. So we have pushed this now. And so